I'm delighted to speak on this as a former teacher. I was a teacher for nearly 30 years, and most of that time was spent in Breffni College in Cavan. And so I'm very proud of my teaching career. I'm very proud of our education system and of the good work that teachers and SNAs and indeed the whole school staff, secretaries and caretakers put into making our schools a good place to learn the academic subjects, but also to develop for development of social skills for our young people as well. It's extremely important, just as important almost. But to make it a world-class system, I think there has to be a number of things done. And so while there has been considerable investment and considerably good work done over the last number of years, and we continue to see that improvement, there are still some issues that need to be addressed. And as the previous speaker just mentioned there, our investment in education is below, and still considerably below, the OECD average. Now, according to a report last year, which I know and I will acknowledge was based on the 2021 figures, but the average investment was 5.7% of GDP across the OECD area. Ours was only 2.8% at that time, and we were last out of 34 countries, and we are seen as a wealthy country. So we need to invest in our education system. It's really, really important. So that additional investment would mean that the capitation grant could be increased. It means that the basic utility bills, like heat and light, that some schools are finding difficult to pay, could be paid without worrying and without putting pressure on parents to make contributions to the school that they can ill afford to do. It would also make the difference in class sizes. So again, we are below we are above, the class size, average class size for both across the EU and across the OECD by a number. And the INTO have addressed this issue in their pre-budget asks, and it was to reduce the class size to 1 to 19. And that would make an immense difference, because I know from teaching a class of 30 compared to teaching a class of 15, the amount of work that you can do with the students is immense. And if you have students, which we want to see more mixed ability teaching in our schools, if you have students with additional needs, if you have students coming from another country, maybe with language difficulties, the amount of time you can spend with them when the class size is small compared to the class size being large is immense and makes a huge difference to them and ensures that we have an inclusive education. In relation to capitation as well, I just want to raise an issue that has been raised with me by schools. The capitation grant is paid dependent on the number of students registered in a school on the 30th of September on the POD system. So if a student enters the school after that date, the school doesn't receive any money for that student for that school year. So there's different reasons for a student coming to a school. They may need to leave one school because of certain issues and to go to another. They may move into a different area. They may come from a different country. But it means that school doesn't receive the money. It also affects the school book grants as well, in that they don't receive the money for those and they have to go looking for it. And sometimes that can be a complicated process and they have to wait a long time as well. So if there could be something done to ensure that if students move or join a school, that the capitation can be drawn down for that student, even if it is a few months into the school year. The school I taught in had GESH status, so I know the benefits of the GESH in schools that have significant disadvantage. But I am dealing with a school where there is one town where there are 4 primary schools and 3 of them have GESH status and 1 doesn't. And they feel that puts them at a huge disadvantage to the other schools, and they don't understand as well why they're not deemed eligible for GESH, but when their students that are attending the school come from the same area as the students attending the other schools. And I know there's different criteria, and I know one of it, say for example, is homelessness, and they would say they would have families who are homeless, but they're not registered as homeless because maybe they're living with family, in the box room, or they're sleeping on the sofa, and there's a stigma attached to, registering yourself as homeless as well, and they don't want to. So, I mean, there are criteria there, and I'm just wondering if it could be a little bit, if it could be looked at again to ensure that all schools are deemed or are assessed in all areas. And I just would like, Minister, if you would just expand on the GESH Plus you're talking about there. Is that additional supports to schools that already have GESH status, or is it going to include more schools that don't currently have GESH status into the GESH programme? And as part of the GESH programme, the School Completion Programme is an excellent programme. And again, the cuts to that programme after austerity the last time had a huge impact. Like I recall teaching where in the early 2000s, what we call the Celtic Tiger period, the school completion programme had significant funds and could therefore employ a number of people to work in the school. And one of the people employed in the school I worked in was a school counsellor, and she did immense work with students who might have had mental health issues or might have been self-harming. And unfortunately, her position and other positions were gone after austerity. So it's just to see investment in the school completion programme, because it has a huge part to play in ensuring that students from disadvantaged backgrounds, including traveller backgrounds, stay in school longer, and the benefits they will reap from that will be seen in later years. I want to join again with the previous speaker around Irish language education. I mean, most of us spend 13 or 14 years in the Irish education system, and we come out of the school and we can't string a conversation in Irish together. You know, and there's a huge interest in the moment among young Irish people in learning the language and in speaking the language. I don't know, the focus seems to be wrong in our schools, where it's on almost the written, and especially in secondary school, it's about passing an exam. And you know, I've had situations where I didn't teach Irish, but I had situations where students, they just wanted to be able to write the language, and they didn't even know what the words meant, like once they could string the sentence together on page. And I mean, like, I did French in school for 5 years, and I would say after the end of that, I wasn't great at conversation in French either. I don't think I would have headed off to France and been able to engage with French people. So maybe a look at how we teach our languages other than English in our schools, but particularly our national language. So as I said, we learn our language, we learn to speak a language by immersion in it and by talking to others and listening to our parents and listening to others around us as little children. And the same thing should happen within especially our primary school education, where the focus should be more on oral. Special education obviously is a big issue, and we had over 120 students last year at the beginning of the school term with no school placement. And I know a lot of them received school placements since that, but we have a lot of students as well who are not, they might have a school placement, but it's not necessarily an appropriate school placement, or it's not in their community. And I know again there's been considerable investment in special education, but I suppose we need to look at maybe how we make education more inclusive for all, so that students with additional needs can attend their local school with their siblings where possible, or attend a school in their community if at all possible, instead of having to travel maybe up to an hour to receive the appropriate education. I do think the early intervention is key, though, and I mean, an awful lot of our students are either non-verbal or pre-verbal going into schools, and they're not getting the early intervention that they were getting from the early intervention team some years ago. They're not getting it from the CDNTs, and that's leading to huge problems where there's a lack of ability to communicate. It's leading to frustration, it's leading them to self-harm in some cases, or cause injuries to other pupils and to staff, and to regularly the school placement breaking down. So I think, again, we need to look and see how we can ensure that every child receives an appropriate education with the appropriate supports. And I know, talking to a number of primary schools, they would love to see what you're talking about rolling out are the therapies in schools. They really feel it's so necessary to help them, and then obviously help the students to learn, because they really feel they don't know how to deal with students with complex needs. So I would like to see an inclusive education, but that can't happen until the supports are there for the children, but also supports for the staff, and that all staff are trained to teach in special education settings. Okay, go on, Margaret.